This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. I remember as a young father, I didn't like toys left out in the yard. It was just something that, just by appearance, you didn't want to see when you drove up in the yard. I don't know. I worked hard on my yard back when I was younger, grew flowers, those sorts of things. And the idea that brightly, colored plastic items were laying out in the yard is just not something that I wanted to see and that I wanted others to see. It gave me a feeling of disorder and that my yard was unkempt and that sort of thing. But boy, how times have changed. Now I'm a papa. I've got two beautiful grandchildren whom I love more than just about anything in the world, save Kimmy, of course. And now, in my backyard, I have got toys spread about, big wheels, tricycles, plastic blocks. I got everything. My patio is literally covered with this stuff. And I go sit in amongst it and play with my grandchildren. My granddaughter is always cooking me imaginary meals. And of course, they say the old adage, if a 3-year-old offers you an imaginary meal, you take it and you pretend you're going to eat it. But one of the things that's back there on my patio is a beige with a gray roof plastic playhouse that extends out, and I think about all of the joy that my grandbabies have had on it. Now, Harper, my granddaughter, she plays house inside of it, but her brother, who is 6, climbs on top of it and jumps off like a madman. But yet, it's a place of joy. Unfortunately, today on Body Bags, we're going to discuss another playhouse. A playhouse that was created in a factory somewhere, hopefully for the joy of children, but it turned out to house one of the ugliest secrets that we can possibly imagine involving a child. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
But Joe, in this case, when we first started covering it was because it was a missing child.
Yeah, I didn't cover it. You covered it with Nancy.
I did.
You've been on this for a long time, Dave.
I've been since it was listed as an Amber Alert. And it's not that dissimilar from Harmony Montgomery's case because it was you've got a 1.5-year-old child that is missing and an Amber Alert goes out. So that's what catches the attention in the true crime, or in the news related field, which, from Nancy Gray's standpoint, if you've got a missing child, she wants to know what's going on here. That's the one thing that gets her attention always. Missing child. Let's help find them. That's it. She approaches it from what can we do to help?
When it comes to kids, the antenna go up, in a case like this, and it requires, quite a bit of focus in order to, try to understand those first bits of information. But it's my understanding that in the case that we're talking about today, and of course we're talking about Baby Evelyn, wasn't it Baby Evelyn's daddy that first alerted authorities to her absence?
No, actually what happened is it was her grandfather.
Her grandfather.
Okay, what happened is, and this is what I was going to say at the beginning, is when there is a missing child and we get a note from Nancy, hey, cover this, find out what's going on. Then you find out who reported her missing, the child missing. That's the biggest thing. Who reported her missing? And in this case, it's not her mother. Her mother is the sole legal custodian of this child, and she did not report her missing. It was the baby's grandfather. And he reports her missing after he starts calling her. He goes, I haven't seen her in a while. I don't know where my granddaughter is. And regardless of the family dynamic of Boswell, regardless of whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, he was the one who said, I haven't seen my granddaughter in a while. And he calls other relatives and friends to find out who has seen my granddaughter. And he was the one that traced it back and realized nobody has seen this baby since December 10th or 11th of 2019. And we're in February of 2020. We're talking 2 months. Nobody has seen her. So that's when the Amber Alert goes out. And that's where we began the coverage, and that's where the stories began, because it did not take long, Joseph Scott Morgan, for Megan Boswell, the mother of baby Evelyn, to start doing interviews. She does them on local television. She does them on national. She's all over the media telling stories about her baby.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, Joe, she told inconsistent stories about what happened to her daughter, to baby Evelyn.
And that's one of the things as an investigator that you're looking for. One of the problems with telling an untruth, a prevarication, a lie, is that you have to go back, and for every wrong thing that you say, there's going to be 2 or 3 outcomes that are non-predictable because you're not sticking with the truth. And that's a big red flag, for investigators. And I'm not one of these types like a homicide detective that's like they'll say they're a human lie detector. And there are people out there that are really good at it. I'm amazed by them. Matter of fact, I'm kind of scared of them a little bit. I don't know if I try to be a truthful person, but they're always eyeballing you and looking at your body language and all that sort of thing. And Dave, just based upon this wide-ranging, wild tale that Evelyn's mother is putting forth, the TBI agents, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, their spidey senses must have been tingling all over the place, because it's so absurd, absolutely absurd.
And it goes back to the grandfather reporting her missing, not the mother. So here's what we actually have. The first story, it actually makes sense to a degree. Evelyn's mother, Megan Boswell, at the time is 18 years old. At the time this is taking place, an 18-year-old mother, not sophisticated at all. And she has a lot of cameras in her face. And she first says, well, baby Evelyn is not missing. She's with her father. And even though he's not, he has nothing to do with custody and never has, because she is the sole custodian of Evelyn, but she claims he has her. Well, okay. First thing we look at, who is the biological father? He's a military guy, Joe, and active military. If he's
stationed in Louisiana, right?
Yeah. Active duty military. We can find him, right?
Oh yeah.
And so they did.
And here's the thing about it is, if he is active duty, now don't get me wrong. I mean, guys on active duty can fly under the radar. However, you're more prone to pop up on a radar relative to your activity. If you've got leave statements, if you've been on leave, if you're deployed, if you're doing what are called FTXs, field training exercises, if you're in the office, there is such a level of accountability that the military can track you down. If you're living on post and you've got a precious little baby with you, and you don't normally have a precious little baby, you're going to stand out. So the idea that she could say that that Evelyn is with her biological father, an active duty troop in Louisiana, well, that's going to be pretty easy to track down, Dave.
And that's exactly what they did. So they go to the biological father, whose name is Perry. And, Joe, Ethan Perry doesn't have baby Evelyn. By the way, I got to be very clear. Megan Boswell went further than just saying that Perry had the baby, that she was with him. She went further than that. She even went so far as to say, well, we've got plans. We're meeting up at this grocery store parking lot. I mean, Megan Boswell, the mother of this child, has allowed an Amber Alert to be released about her baby. And and tells police, no, I know where she is and I'm meeting up with her. Her mind is not even able to bank on what she has said and what she's committed to. So in her mind's eye, she thinks what she is telling police and the world in the media, that it's realistic to say that her dad, her biological father, has the baby, even though everybody's looking for the baby. Makes no sense.
It makes no sense whatsoever. But as we have seen throughout the years with cases like this, where people lie and people try to deceive and people try to put investigators off scent, and let's face it, they try to put those that are trying to do a good turn, those individuals that would want to be the saviors or the rescuers of this baby, trying to put them off scent. It will always come back to haunt you, and the truth will find you out. Having a child disappear from my side in a store, which has happened, and I'm sure that it has happened to a lot of people within the sound of my voice. I'm sure it's happened to you, Brother Dave. It turns your guts up in such a way that you slip into panic, where you're just trying to find them, and it's a terrifying position to be in. And I think that one of the things that folks look at, particularly trained investigators, when it comes down to trying to assess the whereabouts of a child and the individuals that are in that child's immediate circle, those that have to take care, that are tasked with taking care of a child, they're going to look and see what the reaction is. How emotionally vested are the caretakers in the life of a precious little angel? Do they actually seem like they're interested in finding the child? Do they seem like they're being deceptive in any way? Or are they just in a position where they're so panicked they can't communicate? And there are multiple ways you can view, certainly an initial reporter of a case, and of course those that should be providing watch care over a child. What do you think about that, Dave?
Joe, from the very beginning of this case, whenever a parent doesn't know where their child is, I immediately go red flag. When anybody other than the person responsible for the child reports them missing, red flag.
Yeah.
And when they're telling stories that are easy to verify and make, again, no sense, red flag. And so, boom, you start looking at, look, Joe, if your wife is mentally diminished temporarily due to an accident and you're her caregiver, you're responsible for her, and something happens to her, she's missing, you're the one that's got to answer the questions. If I report Kim missing, they're going to go, Dave, Mack, why are you reporting her missing? Joe's responsible for her.
Right.
Same thing with a child.
Yeah. And these wild stories of reporting Evelyn to have been in custody of her biological father, who doesn't have the deepest intimate connection with this child to begin with, but then to kind of flip the script, Dave, in this particular case, you've got the mother saying that that her mother, the grandmother of Evelyn, has been in custody of Evelyn. That I think that they even went camping up in the Virginias, which is, again, it's one of those things that's so easily verifiable. And, you mentioned just a moment ago, you've got this 18-year-old person whose brain is so disordered and standing in front of cameras and continuing to make these comments. I can only imagine, and I can't imagine the conversations that were going on in the offices at TBI and the other investigative agencies that were involved in this. They're being very, very quiet, kind of like the Sphinx, and they're just kind of watching and observing everything that's coming out of Mama's mouth relative to this. And they know that something stinks about this, Dave.
You're absolutely right, Joe. And I've asked of you and others because of your background with investigations. I've asked about how do you move forward when because you've worked with police and investigators and trying to figure these things out. But how do you move forward in an investigation when you know the person who should have all the answers is lying? You've got to do a parallel investigation, correct?
Yes, you do, and you'll have those that are kind of in the forefront that are speaking directly to the mom, to all of the principals involved. But then you've got people that are doing things like checking phone records, they're checking movements, they're trying to get into the lifestyle of the individual to see if they're engaged in any kind of nefarious behavior. It's kind of like, we had mentioned before off the air, I talked about Susan Smith, who again is back in the news in the last couple of weeks. She got denied relative to parole, thank God. But when she slaughtered those two babies in the back of that car, when she let it go into the lake, her motivation was that she was engaged in an extramarital affair. And that was her end game. So you would have this parallel investigation going on where you have investigators that are digging into the life of a subject to try to determine what are those things that are not being said? What is it that we can bring to light here? And in Evelyn's case, you begin to think about this precious little baby who is so dependent. She's so very young, Dave, and she's completely dependent upon those who are her caretakers. How would she make it on her own? What's the possibility? So, it would stand to reason, well, is she anywhere near? Do you think her body at this point in time, because now we're many weeks downrange, do you think her body is anywhere near the location where she was last seen or where she would frequent, those sorts of things? And then you begin to look at, even overlays of land surrounding this, where anybody would be domiciled that would have an intimate connection to this child, just to try to piece this thing together. Movements. What kind of access does the mother have to transportation? Is she capable? Does she have the ability to move around? Has she taken any long trips? Those sorts of things. So, yeah, you're right. You're right on the money with the parallel investigation to try to suss all this out. But I'm still fascinated by the fact that the mother of Evelyn had stated that her mother had gone on a camping trip with Evelyn.
She had stated a lot of things that investigators didn't believe. They just did not believe what they were being told, So here we go. Story number 2, of course, was that Boswell tells investigators that Evelyn's grandmother has the child and is refusing to return her. Now, remember, first story, baby daddy has the baby, and I'm going to meet with him in a parking lot and pick up the baby. Then, no, her grandmother has her and she's refusing to return. Then the third one, Boswell claims that the grandmother gave baby Evelyn to an unnamed person and that Evelyn is safe and would have a better life with that person. So in her immature, developed brain, or however you want to look at the so-called mother here, Megan Boswell changes the story 3 times. She probably told a bunch of other different versions, but these are the versions she found believable too, that she thought, hey, I think Joe will believe this. If I tell them that we gave her to a better, they'll quit looking at me. We gave her to a nice young woman who will give her a better life. And, don't bother looking anymore. Evelyn's, they probably even changed her name. She's probably not even called. The baby was 15 months old. I think I said earlier, 18. 15 months old, Joe. Yeah. And these are the stories the mother is telling. And she's not telling these in the days after the child is last seen, months. Yeah. Child last seen December 10th or 11th. We're now downrange past February, and we're in the latter part of February. And that's why it's the gloves come off in the investigation, Joe. It's just not to be believed. And they've got to find what happened. At this point, investigators are going, we're looking for a corpse. Where are we going to find it? And you mentioned a minute ago, you're going to look at all the areas nearby.
Yeah,
all the areas.
And let me say one more thing about these wide-ranging stories. When a subject does this, They might think that, and through their own perception, through this view that they have of the world, they might think that they are actually deceiving. And here's the thing that's so outlandish about this, Dave. You, as an 18-year-old, are literally trying to deceive people whose job it is on a daily basis to try to determine the veracity of a story. And then when you offer up all of these potentials, these 3 scenarios that she's given, when they put you in the chair in that room and they begin to talk to you, you know what they're going to say? They're going to bring up the first story and they say, well, you told us this here and that turned out not to be true. But then you said that your mother had possession of Evelyn. And of course, we found out that that wasn't true. And then the idea that you've got this mystery person that's taken the child or was given the child because she wanted to, and you felt that it was best because she would have a better life. Can you try to work out this timeline and they will task you with something like that. And they'll never actually say, like, right up front in the very beginning, you're lying to us. They're going to ask you, because it's kind of like putting one foot, like a fly puts one foot on a piece of fly paper. The next thing you know, they got 2, then they got 3. Their legs are crossed, and there's no escaping this because the logic or the attempt to make this logical just doesn't add up. And of course, in Baby Evelyn's case, nothing could have been further from the truth as it applies to those stories that her mama was telling about her. Many years ago, I was summoned to the scene of found skeletal remains. And we were working a scene, and the remains you could tell the initial location of where the remains were because we had a collection of rib bones and a few vertebrae. But everything else, all the other remnants of the body had been scattered. And that's evidence of animal activity. And it was out in the woods. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I was with another investigator, a police officer, and we found a set of washers, a washer and dryer set that was out in the woods. And, animals can take bones and take them under things like appliances, abandoned appliances. And we said, okay, we need to push these out of the way. And when we did, and they flipped on their back, we didn't find bones. What we found was 2 rattlesnakes that were coiled and shaking their tails at us. Dave, as horrible as that was, that event, and terrifying, I have to admit, I'll fully confess right here as a grown man, I think I squealed. I think I squealed a little bit, and may have even peed my pants a little bit too, as it certainly got my attention. I mean, I was right adjacent to these things. Nothing could match what was discovered in this little playhouse on the property of Evelyn's grandpa's home, Dave.
It was Evelyn's grandfather that actually called investigators. Now, I can't put ideas into anybody's head, but he calls the TBI. He's the one that makes the call. Hey, this is from the trial. The investigator, Agent Brian Fraley of the TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, said, quote, "We received a call from the defendant's father talking about property, a storage shed on the property. He believed it may have been valuable for us to look in it and search. So we did respond and search that. And there was a playhouse behind that." Okay, you've got the shed, then you got a playhouse. And behind that, in the playhouse, in a trash can. But more than that, Joe, there were several bags of trash in said playhouse. You've got the big shed the family uses for whatever. Then you got the playhouse behind it. And that even at 15 months, she wasn't old enough to be in that playhouse, Joe. It would have been probably another year before she would have been in a little playhouse like that and making little things going on, 2.5. And she's 15 months old. That's 1 year and 3 months old. And this playhouse has trash bags all over, and they're looking and digging, and they find the trash can underneath other bags. And inside said trash can, they find the baby that the entire world is looking for, Baby Evelyn, in a trash bag, Joe.
Yeah. And, that's, I think that's emblematic to a certain degree. I don't want to go down the road too far with symbolism here as the way one human views another. However, I think that we would have to say in a case like this kind of gives you an idea as to how this child was regarded. That this child would wind up like this. And Dave, here's one of the things I was thinking about. If an individual were to place Baby Evelyn in this playhouse inside of a trash can with trash stacked all over the body, if said individual had now gone out and given interviews relative to the whereabouts of the child, they know, they might not understand what they're saying in front of the camera, but they know they're being watched. The opportunity to have removed the remains of Baby Evelyn and spirited them to another location where they would not have been as easily found, that window has closed. So essentially you have Baby Evelyn's mother that has now found herself in a trap. It's literally checkmate at this point in time, because there's nothing you can do except have this kind of play out before you. I truly wonder if when confronted with this, if Evelyn's mother ever thought about saying, well, it wasn't me, other family members didn't like her, wanted to do this to her, this sort of thing. And I have to think that based upon these other lies and deceit that have gone on, that probably would have crossed her mind, because right now she's an animal just trying to survive, because she's got herself in this position and she knows that there's no way out, Dave.
Now, let me ask you, Joe, because you're going to have to figure out, you found the body, but you got to figure out, how did she die? Because what if Baby Evelyn died of an accident? Just make up an accident that could have been feasible, and the mother panics and at 18 puts the baby in the trash, trying to figure out what to do. I cannot fathom this. I'm trying to make up something that she might have thought, But what if? I mean, you're going to actually prove that this baby was killed, and you're going to try to prove who killed her. You've got to put all that together. You arrive on the scene, and you find the baby. What condition was Baby Evelyn when they found her? What are they looking at, and what happened next? How did they uncover what happened to Baby Evelyn?
Well, I can tell you right up front, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about this, the status of her body. We're talking about East Tennessee, and we're talking about where the last time Baby Evelyn is seen, and this is per the babysitter, if you recall, which I know you do, was early December. I think it was like the 10th or the 11th. So if we track back to there and we think about East Tennessee during the late fall, early winter months, and now we're all the way to March of 2020, when her body is first discovered, when her body is finally discovered back there in that trash can, her body would not have been as decomposed, perhaps if this had started in May and gone on until August or September. But you're going to be compromised relative to obvious signs of trauma. And there were several things that arose at trial and per the examination of the medical examiner in Baby Evelyn's case to try to come up with a cause of death. Now, obviously, because there's two medical examiners that were actually consulted on this case. The conclusion was that the manner of death is listed as a homicide. That's pretty clear, as far as the condition of the body being contained within a bag, that goes to hiding of the body and then sequestering the body so that no one else would find it. Well, that in and of itself gives you pause to know that this is probably homicidal violence. The trick, though, here, and one of the things they're having to deal with, Dave, is the factor of decomposition, the length of time that has gone on. So they're having to come up with a cause of death. Now, one of the forensic pathologists in this case had actually opined that this could very well have been a positional asphyxia. Okay. And this is the absolute horror of this. And we have other evidence that might kind of lean into this supposition, is that if this is in fact positional asphyxia, David, she was alive when she was put in there. She's alive when she's put in there, because in order to bring about the mechanism of death with positional asphyxia, if you're saying that position is dictated by the garbage can, that means contracted inside of a bag like this, okay, and I'm doing like almost a fetal position, that means that baby can't move. That means that baby can't move, can't get out. And if you've got all this other crap that's piled in on top of it, that baby is going to die in a position, and it becomes very torturous now, because, the medical examiner is trying to understand two things here. How did this mechanism work? Was she suffocated? And I think that probably, as horrific as this is for me to say, okay, I think that most of us could agree it would be more merciful to have asphyxiated this child, hand over the mouth, bag over the head, whatever the case might have been, and depriving her of oxygen in the immediate, as opposed to having her beneath piles of trash stuffed down into a black garbage can. Either way you look at it, the cause of death is horrific. But in my estimation, Dave, the idea that the medical examiner has even entertained this idea that the child would have died as a result of positional asphyxia enters an entirely new level of horror in this case, because it shows, well, first off, it shows a complete absence of basic humanity. And we're talking about a child that came from her mother. This is not a random child off the street. This is a child that she had given birth to, a child that, to a certain degree, she had kept alive, at least for 13 months, that it's possible that she could have done this. And I don't have time for people that say, well, you don't understand, she's in a mental state that would have affected her judgment, or she's too young to understand the ways of the world. No, she's not. She knows what basic needs are that you have to have in order to sustain a child. Even the most simple animals in the animal kingdom have this basic understanding. So this goes to a higher level of terror here. And this is what it would have been, because an individual that dies as a result of positional asphyxia experiences terror. See, there's an awareness to it, Dave. That's the thing about it. If you're dying of positional asphyxia, unless you are unconscious, and I've had people that are drug ODs that have died of positional asphyxia, and they didn't have an awareness because they were so sedated by the drugs they were on. But we're talking about something else here entirely, Dave.
Well, okay, let me ask you about this, Joe, because what we have, according to testimony, that Evelyn's body showed active decomposition occurring in a confined space. And this is what was said in the actual testimony.
Yes.
That Evelyn's body had been unnaturally folded and her body had been wrapped so tightly that her facial features flattened.
Yes. Yeah. And that
what in the world evil exists that could even.
Yeah. Yeah. And what that means is it's kind of fascinating from a scientific perspective. When bodies are, and I've seen it with the fresh dead as well, but with decomposing bodies in particular, the skin it loses its natural elasticity, where like if you pinch your cheek right now and pull it out and let go, it's going to pop back. And there's not going to be an evidence like where you're unless you just have no collagen in your skin, where you had pinched your skin and it leaves creases there. As a result of decompositional changes, in particular, when you wrap, say for instance, or press down into a position, let's say face down, I've seen the nose actually looks like silly putty. It does not pop back. It just kind of flattens out like this. So when you've got a child's remains rather, that have been so contracted like this over a period of time, and again, having not been there to judge what they're saying about the tight wrappings, they should be on target here. The face would have been so compressed that the skin would not have popped back. So the face would have this appearance of something that was created in a nightmare scenario that someone had rendered up, some horror writer had rendered up onto a page, or, an illustration of some kind that would have made her look absolutely monstrous. But that aside, when you begin to think about these wrappings, and again, this can go to positional asphyxia because you can have individuals that are wrapped, okay? And I've seen this in an autoerotic case actually before, where an individual had wrapped themselves up in a carpet, of all things, while in a scuba suit. We'll talk about that another day. The skin will become very mottled. It will become formed to whatever it is that is creating this compression on the outer surface of the skin, and whatever the face is resting upon. So the child's in a compressed, contracted position. This could mean that not only is she in a positional asphyxia scenario where she would die of oxygen deprivation, but another issue that could have killed her is the fact that she's tightly constricted with these wrappings. That may have led to this idea of asphyxia, suffocation, this sort of thing.
What about tinfoil being wrapped around her, Joe? I saw that and I'm like, what in the world?
I have never encountered this in all of my years of covering cases. We use tinfoil obviously for a variety of things. And I don't know about, Kim and I still use tinfoil to, put them, to wrap them things we're going to throw in a refrigerator, or even in the freezer sometimes. But, it's almost like a layering is taking place. I think one of the toughest things for me to swallow and to kind of wrap my brain around, Dave, and again, this goes to what we were talking about earlier. Was she alive when she went in there? Well, Dave, they recovered latent prints on the surface of this tinfoil. And tinfoil, you would think that it would be very easy to recover latent prints. Whoever did this recovery did a jam up job, because once you break tinfoil off of the roll, okay, it ceases to be pristine any longer, because all you have to do is just slightly move it, and it's going to create all these little creases and crevices, and it will be, even if you try to smooth it out, you'll never get it back to the way it was, when it was on the pristine roll. But back to what I was saying, Dave, they recovered latent prints off of this tinfoil. And not only was baby Evelyn's mother's latent prints found on the surface of the tinfoil, baby Evelyn's prints were found on the tinfoil. So what does that say? Well, either she was playing with the tinfoil in life, or she was fighting against having this placed upon her, and she's touching it with her unsecured hands and leaving it on the surface of the tinfoil. Many years ago, I went to a conference, and forgive me if I've mentioned this before, but it was one of the most horrible things I'd ever heard relative to the prints of children, and it had to do with the Oklahoma City bombing. And the crime scene investigator that was doing the prints off of you remember the kindergarten that got destroyed at the Murrow building. Their children have no fingerprints on file. So he had to go back to the homes of the children that were in the nursery, and he started weeping on stage. And this guy, I believe he worked for the FBI. He was on the evidence response team. He began weeping on stage. He said it was the toughest thing he'd ever had to do. He went to their homes and dusted for latent prints on their toys and their cribs in order to compare prints. I'd never heard anything like it. So the only way that they could have done this with baby Evelyn was they recover the unknown print off of the tinfoil, and then keep in mind, her body's decomposing. They would have to go to special lengths in order to lift a print off of her body because her hands would have been decomposing. So they would have had to have rehydrated the fingertips. There's any number of methods that I will not get into on this episode that we do that with. And then they would have compared the prints. It's one thing to have mom's prints. You can roll her prints when she's hooked up on charges. You got her print captured and you can identify that. But, for me, Dave, it's almost like the child in death is sending a message, to all of us that are viewing this case and trying to understand actually what happened to her, Dave.
This happened December 2019, last time baby Evelyn alive. February reported missing. March they recover the body, and now here we are, 5 years down the range, and we finally do have Megan Boswell, the biological mother of Evelyn, standing trial for her murder.
Yes.
The end result of what Megan Boswell, after all the lies that she told along the way, she eventually said that Evelyn was sleeping with Megan and her boyfriend, and somehow she was smothered in the night, and that's how she died. Now, that was her story that she was finally sticking to when they went to trial. And as we mentioned already, this case has been adjudicated, thankfully. Yes. And Joe, I don't know if you can ever sentence somebody properly, for something of this magnitude, because it is just so horrific. When I got to the description of the TBI investigator about how her body was found, and the things you've explained today, there's no way you can look at this and not see the evil that exists.
You can. You truly can, Dave. It's a glimpse behind the scenes, but I urge everyone out there. There are people all over this country, all over our blessed country, that don't have children, that would love to have a child. I don't understand this. I've never understood it as an investigator. I've never understood it as a college professor, and I've certainly never understood it by virtue of these cases that Dave Mack and I cover. It's impossible to make sense of why someone would destroy a little angel like this. And unfortunately, I know that there will be other cases that we will cover that will not necessarily be dissimilar to Baby Evelyn and Harmony Montgomery. Evil is real, folks. Evil is real. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.